Welcome back to the program, everybody, and we're now moving into episode 8. We've covered quite a lot of ground so far, and now it's time to learn about logical expressions. Now, the aim of this episode is to introduce you to logical expressions, some of which we've covered before, and how to use them in your SQL code. The first part, we'll be looking at some of the most common ones, the AND and the OR operators, and in part 2 we'll be looking at some of the other ones that you're likely to see splattered everywhere in the SQL code that you work with. Part 3 we'll wrap up with the case statement. So let's head on in to part 1 and have a look at the AND and the OR operators. Okay, we start off with episode 8, learning about the AND and OR comparison operators. Now, we've seen AND in action quite a bit in previous episodes, where we looked at the when you join, and part of the join you have another filter using the AND, and also in the where clause where you can have AND included in that too. So if we have this clause here, for example, where the salesperson is equal to, and we execute that, as you can see, we're only pulling rows where the salesperson ID is equal to 2. Scroll all the way down, you can only see the 2's there. But what if we wanted to say we wanted the salesperson ID to be 2, and we only wanted to see the data from 2016, where the invoice date is 2016? Well, we simply do that with an AND in there. Let's have a look at that. There you go, salesperson 2 and the invoice date 2016. Got 925 rows there. And we have our where clause filtering the data down on those 2 criteria. And we can continue doing this. So if we said bill to customer ID is equal to 401 with the AND clause, that will restrict things even further. So here you go, salesperson 2, invoice date 2016, and bill to customer is only 401. That's returning even less rows at 273. There you go. It's pretty straightforward. You can really cut down the data you want to work with in your queries simply by putting a few ANDs in the where clause. Now, one thing to remember with AND is that it's all about selecting data from different columns. So for example, if I said and salesperson is equal to 3, and I ran that query off, obviously I wouldn't get any rows, because the salesperson ID column, it's either 2 or 3 or any other value, but not both. So you can't really do AND on the same column effectively. It's there mainly for different columns. As you can see here, we've taken different columns and put filtering criteria on those. That's just one thing to remember on the ANDs. So let's have a look at ORs. We're using the same table. What we're going to say is return where its salesperson ID is equal to 2, or its salesperson ID is equal to 3. So now we're pulling values from the same column, but in place we're saying OR. So let's see the results with those. As you can see, salesperson ID is either 2 or it's 3. So once again, as you can see down the whole list, it pulls both those values. So you can use an OR to put conditions on the same column. Now we can continue putting in more ORs. So we're saying here 2016, so it's 2 or 3 on the salesperson ID, or the invoice date is 2016. Let's see what we get with that. So now we've got salesperson 2 and 3. But as you can see, the invoice date is any invoice date, because what we're saying is if that's 2, then pull this row, which it's done. Or if it's 3, then pull the row, which it's done. Or if it's 2016, then pull the row on that invoice date. So you may be expecting to see salesperson IDs of 2 and 3 on an invoice date of 2016, but you can see we're returning a lot more results. So the thing to remember on that is when using ORs, you can start to get some funny results on that if you use too many ORs. Let's remove that and let's see what happens if we throw in an AND. Let's see what happens to those results. So we're getting 21,000 rows there. If we're trying to restrict our results to just salesperson 2, 3, and it has to have an invoice date of 2016. Let's have a look. Again, we've got less rows than the previous ORs, but again, we're not getting the right invoice date here. So we've got salesperson ID of 2 and 3, so that's fine, that filtering worked, but we are getting invoice dates of not 2016, which we're after. So how do we then say, give me all the rows with salesperson IDs of 2 and 3, but filtered on an invoice date year of 2016? Well, because the OR is a comparison on the same column, all we need to do is make sure we put those in brackets, like so. Now what it's saying is, this now becomes one comparison. So give me salesperson ID 2 or 3, and that's one comparison that we want to make, and give me the year of the invoice date that is equal to 2016. So let's give that a go. There you go, a lot less rows. Now we've got 2s and 3s on the salesperson ID, and everything is 2016. So there we go, we've got our results that we were after in the beginning. Only salespersons 2 or 3, and they all have to have year of the invoice date equal to 2016. So what you need to do when you first start using ORs and ANDs, you really need to practice, check out different results, and if you're doing some quite complex queries with these sort of operators being used together, make sure you thoroughly check your results at the end to make sure you're only extracting the right ones and what you need. So that's mixing ORs and ANDs together and some of the pitfalls you might encounter. Let's have a little bit further down. We've got quite a complex query here, and we're going to put an AND and an OR on the inner join, and we'll see what happens. So all we're after is a series of order numbers, order lines, salespersons, and picked completed when. And what we're saying is that we just want everything picked in 2016 or everything for salesperson 8. So let's have a go. Let's run that query off and see what happens. As you can see, straight away we're expecting some results to show. There's nothing there. The timer on the right is counting up. Not looking good. You can probably hear my PC fan going into overdrive as the CPU starts to melt through the motherboard. And we can see that, well, that's not really working all that well. So let's go ahead and cancel it by pressing the red square up here on the top left, and that will cancel our query. Give the poor computer a little bit of a rest after that. So as you can see, using ANDs and ORs together, especially within a join, can really increase the overhead of a query. and blitz the CPU quite badly. And that's mainly because OR can be quite labor intensive on SQL Server, ANDs are very straightforward. ORs on the other side are very resource hungry when you use them in comparison. So if we were just going for AND, that query would work fine, 29,000 rows, no worries there. But we want to see what happens with this AND and the ORs. So let's put them in the where clause instead. So we want everything with a year of 2016, or everything where the salesperson ID is 8. Let's see what happens there if we run into the same issues. And straight away we get our results in less than a second. So the main lesson to take away from that is that ORs can be quite resource intensive when used in certain scenarios, and especially when used in your join, it can really confuse the poor computer. So let's keep those ORs out of the joins. We've got 49,443 rows. Now, even though we do have our OR outside of the join and within the where clause, OR itself can become quite a resource hungry command or comparison operator to put into your SQL queries. And you may find sometimes that when you're running off a set of data and you've got an OR or several ORs in there, it really slows things down and you may not get your results sets back after a few minutes. So one way you can look at improving that is to say split your two select statements and your two conditions and join them with a union. So basically here, select everything based on this criteria, which is our first one here, and then select exactly the same lines with the second criteria, which is this one here. So let's see how that goes. Execute that really quick, and again we've got 49,443 rows, same as this query up top here. Now I've used this several times, this version. Normally I would start off with this version and see how it runs, and if the code is taking a long time to complete or run and I need it to run quickly, for example if I'm producing a report and it needs to run very swiftly and it's not because of the OR, then I've split it out like this, given it a go, and if it runs swiftly then I'll stick with this. Granted, you are doing two select statements from the same table, but in certain scenarios it may actually function a lot quicker to do that and remove any ORs from your code. Now I've used union to avoid duplicates, so we had 49,443 rows there. If I put in a union OR, which just simply adds everything in this select at the end of everything in this select, as you can see we've got 52,000 rows, so we've got quite a few duplicates in there, 2,500 duplicates. So we want to make sure we remove all those and we'll just go for the union. So two different methods for you to consider, and it all depends on how swiftly your code runs. If it's swift in this scenario, then stick with that. If not, here's another option for you to try to get that query running really sweetly. Alright then, so that's the lesson pretty much wrapped up. Let's finish off with a lovely little example to put what we've learned into practice. So the scenario is that the purchasing manager wants to see a list of purchase orders from 2013. So there's one filter right there to take into consideration, which have a delivery method of air freight or refrigerated air freight. So the two things to consider there. She's after the purchase order ID, the actual delivery method, and the expected delivery date. So, fancy giving that one a try? If so, pause the video, bang out some code, and when you're ready, we'll go through it from my perspective. Right then, let's start off the usual from, and we're looking at purchase orders here. So we're after the purchase order ID. Let's have a look in the database. While we're in orders tables, purchasing purchase orders there. Let's bring that in. Happy days. We're going to call it O for orders. So purchase order ID from that. There's the purchase order ID. And she wants them from 2013. So what we're going to do with that is simply put a filter on our where clause, and there it is, the order date. Press tab to put that one in, equals 2013, not forgetting our year function that we've used on multiple occasions, and we'll put that in. So we've got our filtering going on there. So we'll check out the purchase order IDs, and of course we need the expected delivery date as well. So let's have a look at that table quickly. Expected delivery date. Let's bang that in quickly. Expected delivery date. So that's all done and dusted. We're happy with that. Now we need to bring in the actual delivery method. As you can see from the purchase orders table, we've got a delivery method ID but no actual delivery method. So we're going to need to do some joining on the delivery methods table here, a different schema, but that's the table we're after. I'm going to call it D delivery method ID equals double click that, copy and paste delivery method ID. So we only want the ones where it's air freight and refrigerated air freight. So we're going to have to put in a nice little OR over here. And of course we need our brackets in those as well, because we're checking to see if it's this or this first, and obviously it needs to be 2013. So let's have a look at delivery methods quickly, and we've got the delivery method name in there. Delivery method name equals, and we've got air freight, copy that, paste it in there. That should be an and, not an or. Doesn't matter how you do the formatting, just as long as it makes sense to you. Or delivery method equals refrigerated air freight. There we go, copy that one, paste it in. And then we close our brackets. So as you can see, we have got an and in there. Let's get rid of that last semicolon. We're saying the year is 2013, and the delivery method is air freight or refrigerated air freight here. Not forgetting our brackets, because we need to make sure we consider this as one set of criteria and this as another one completely. So that's done and dusted. Let's bring in the delivery method name that we were after, and that should be it pretty much. Let's check our code, see what's going on, and there you go. You've got the expected delivery date, pretty much all in 2013, purchase order ID, and the delivery method name is only air freight or refrigerated air freight. Now we can double check, of course, that we have the right date. Just put that in as another column. Just make sure that it's working correctly, and see all of those are the year 2013. So we know now that our code is fully functional. Now of course it doesn't matter which way round you put in your where clause. If you did this first and then you said and year equals 2013, pretty much like what I've done here. Where is it? Here. So it doesn't matter which order you put them in, that's fine because they're in the where clause. So how did you all go with that? Did you get something similar to me? If you did, fantastic stuff. That's it for the and the or. I'm sure you'll be using those two quite regularly in your SQL coding going forwards. So until we meet again in the second video, we will look at some more fun with logical operators. I hope you all have a fantastic day.